Hello, hello, hello. It is Monday, March 28th. Happy Monday, the beginning of the week, the work week. And I hope you are ready to get to work because I'm ready to get to work. Again, it's Monday, March 28th, 2022. And yeah, let's talk about stuff. Okay, so today I have, to me personally, what's an exciting tiny mini lecture. And I've been wanting to get to this point in our metabolism march as I wrap it up, because I think uh, the easiest way to understand metabolism is to understand metabolism from societally regular or societally common uh, branches to the understanding of metabolism. And what do I mean? Well, exercise, right? Everybody knows about exercise. Cancer, everybody knows about cancer. Both of those are involved. Uh, Both of those require the metabolism process or metabolic processes to work. Both of those affect the metabolic processes, and both of those are very complicated in many ways in how they do so. And the complication really arises from all the different the network of chemical and protein touch points that are involved. So instead of rambling randomly, let me get to more specifics. So let's start at lactic acid fermentation. So as you recall and know, if you haven't seen my previous videos, as you recall or know, that lactic acid fermentation occurs in skeletal muscle cells in humans, and it also occurs in bacteria, but we're talking about human metabolism right now, where we're focusing that it occurs in skeletal muscle cells in humans when oxygen is low, when there's not enough oxygen for glycolysis to proceed after pyruvate is created into the citric acid cycle through the transition phase into the mitochondria. Because essentially, remember, the electron transport chain is how we get most of our ATP. We need ATP to function, right? Um, we also need NAD plus coenzyme, right? Because glycolysis essentially needs to continue. It uses NAD plus in step 7 or 6 to continue its process. So glycolysis, we need ATP. Glycolysis needs NAD plus. So after some glycolysis cycles, what happens is if there's an NAD plus is also regenerated by the citric acid cycle, right? But again, if there's no oxygen present, we can't go into the citric acid cycle. Therefore, we can't generate coenzyme NAD plus. Okay, that's bad because if NAD plus isn't present, glycolysis can't occur. And so lactic acid fermentation in muscle cells creates NAD plus. Okay, it takes NADHs and creates NAD plus through oxidation. And again, it does so in the presence of low oxygen. So why should that make sense, is because when you're exercising, right, your muscle cells are producing lactic acid, and they are essentially producing NAD plus, so glycolysis can continue. And again, oxygen would be low because obviously you're using up oxygen at a much higher rate when you're exercising more intensely, right? So what happens? So lactic acid gets produced, and that does what to the environment of your cells? Lactic acid increases the pH of your cells, right? Because you have lactic acid, it dissociates into H plus, and the conjugate base. And what happens is H plus then H plus ions increase, the acidity increases, and that can damage your skeletal muscle cells, right? So that's why lactic acid is essentially, lactic acid fermentation is a process of last resort. Also, another thing, right? So you can imagine though, even though this damages your cells, you could conceivably keep going, right, until your cells are completely destroyed. Well, the body does have an answer for that too. So remember, phosphofructose kinase, our old friend from step 3 of glycolysis, probably the most important enzyme in glycolysis, is actually, remember we said there's a lot of allosteric inhibition going on here, and allosteric excitation, and general hormonal excitation, etc. Remember, one of the allosteric inhibitors, I guess we haven't talked about it a ton, but one of the allosteric inhibitors is phosphofructose kinase is H+, right? So in a low pH environment, right? I keep saying high pH, I mean low pH. In a low pH acidic environment, more H+, higher H+ concentration will inhibit phosphofructose kinase activity. And what happens if phosphofructose kinase activity is inhibited? Well, you know what happens, right? Phosphofructose kinase stops working. That's inhibition by a different process, but phosphofructose kinase stops working, and then that stops the use or stops the creation of fructose 1,6 bisphosphate from fructose 6-phosphate, and that ultimately inhibits hexokinase, and that ultimately shuts off glycolysis. So why is that important? How does that tie into lactic acid? Well, that's why you can't keep indefinitely damaging your skeletal muscle cells, right? If glycolysis is shut off, remember glycolysis, the whole point of lactic acid fermentation was to allow glycolysis to continue via the production of NAD+. But if glycolysis is shut off via another mechanism, this phosphofructose kinase inhibition, then you don't have any energy to begin with either. You won't have any energy from lactic acid fermentation, and that's basically your body's way of saying that you need to stop, right? You're not going to continue because you're going to damage your muscles. And that was probably an evolutionary step. So basically, how do we, let's talk a little bit about how we, because we know about endurance, let's talk about how we can improve, the point at which our lactic acid fermentation overwhelms our skeletal muscle cells. So there is an amazingly interesting enzyme called Hypoxia Inducible Factor, which actually, I believe about 3 decades ago, 3 biologists got the Nobel Prize for discovering, as it results to erythropoietin stimulation in the kidneys. Not going down that route right now, but hypoxia inducible factor is important because hypoxia inducible factor actually increases the production of all the glycolytic enzymes. Okay, so and again, these hypoxia inducible factor is produced under anaerobic conditions. So it increases the production of glycolytic enzymes, about 7 of them. It increases the production of another growth factor called vascular endothelial factor. And why that's important is because vascular endothelial factor allows for angiogenesis to occur. And what is angiogenesis? Angiogenesis is the creation of new blood vessels. Okay, so basically this is vascular endothelial factor. Okay, and there's several different types of vascular endothelial factor. We won't go into that detail right now, but essentially when that's present, a blood vessel will essentially start to open up and create a new smaller branch into a different area of your body which was experiencing hypoxia. So so basically, think about it this way: hypoxia-inducing transcription factor, if it just worked on the glycolytic enzymes, then that would be great for any of the glycolytic enzymes any cells that happen to be affected by that hypoxia-inducing transcription factor, and that would be nearby cells. But there are skeletal muscle cells which are farther away from your blood centers, like on the outskirts of your body. And those skeletal muscle cells also, in order to strengthen, right, and to resist lactic acid per fermentation, the effects of the acidity increase, they need to also get more oxygen, right? They need to also get more resources, right? So that they can continue to function and grow stronger and get energy, so that they can go through, so we can hold off lactic acid fermentation longer. So how do they do that? They need to have angiogenesis, or blood vessels grow towards them, right? So we can just quickly go through angiogenesis. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of this right now, but basically in angiogenesis, vascular endothelial growth factor allows for the separation and morphogenesis of blood vessels, of an existing blood vessel, so it branches off, as I was talking about before. And so that's basically how exercise, in a nutshell, through the use of hypoxia inducible factors, increases your body's ability to obtain oxygen, your skeletal muscle cells to obtain oxygen, go through glycolysis faster, produce more ATP, etc. And so another thing to note is that tumors use the same processes. Tumors are uncontrollable growth factors, or uncontrollable growth masses of tissue, and they still need resources to grow. So tumor cells will actually make great use of hypoxia inducible factors. They'll induce the creation of those, and the creation of those themselves is fairly complicated. Hypoxia inducing transcription factors, essentially, there is a precursor enzyme called hypoxia inducing transcription factor alpha, which is I'm not, again, too deep to go into right now, but that is essentially something that its hydrolysis has to be prevented, so that it can go into eventually producing HIF, and essentially tumors do that. Tumor cells allow this process of this precursor enzyme to become the full enzyme, hypoxia-inducing transcription factor, and then, therefore, that allows tumor cells to get to have glycolysis occur faster, produce more energy from themselves, and then also, with the involvement of vascular endothelial growth factor, allow them to get blood. Okay, so that was a lot. I'm going to at some point go into all these other enzymes and hypoxia inducible factors later on its own video in itself, but not right now. We're trying to get through Metabolism March, and I think we've gotten a pretty good way through, and so I just wanted to leave it at that. If you like this video, subscribe, and leave comments. I appreciate you watching, and thanks.